Want to check, John, you can hear us?
Yes.
Okay, good.
We'll order the Finance Committee of the August Township of Newtown. I have a hard stop at 9 o'clock. I had my physical today, which means I haven't eaten in a long time. So
Does that make you hangry?
we'll find out. We'll see how the blood sugar kicks in. The original thing was, hey, can you do it at 2 o'clock in the afternoon? I said, no way in hell. All right. Quick roll call. Mr. Fisher.
Here.
Ms. Pacell. Mr. Nabholz.
Here.
Mr. Skoukis. Please stand for a moment of silence and a pledge of allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, liberty and justice for all. All right. May I have a motion, please, to consider approving the agenda for this meeting of September 21st, 2022?
Second.
Any comment, concerns, issues? Motion moves by 4-0. Any public comment for the agenda items? Thank you. We have a motion, please, to,
For the record, I'm just going to say there was none. just so that it's
okay,
all-
there is no, and you guys probably can't wait to get rid of me this fall. Get this done right. Okay, there's no public comment for the agenda items. May I have a motion, please consider approving the minutes from the July 2022 meeting? Any comment? Motion moved 4-0. Approved, rather, 4-0. May I have a motion, please consider approving the minutes from the August 17th, 2022 meeting? Any comment? Motion is approved by 4-0. Monthly reports to the esteemed Mr. Lafayette.
Sure. So overall, our revenues are down 475,000 in comparison to August of 2022. In addition, our expenses are up $935,000. Included in that 935,000 is a $1.2 million transfer that was approved after the audit. This is a lot of our one-time revenue sources. So some key factors for our revenues, our real estate taxes are up approximately 460,000 in comparison to 2021. As of 8/31, there's still $168,000 left to collect in general fund taxes compared to 125 in 2021. Although the collections have fell behind 2021, we're still on target to actually be above where we budgeted. We budgeted 90, I believe it was a 98.5% collection rate last year, and we're looking to collect more than that this year, or we're projected to collect more than that. Another variance you'll see is a large decrease in our category of other taxes. This is our LST and real estate transfer. Our local services tax is slightly down, about $13,000. We've actually opened up a line of communications with Keystone to do a pretty in-depth analysis on why our LST is down. They're getting back to us with some lists, and at first glance, I want to say the top three, it would be SAP, I believe it was Mainline Health, and off the top of my head, I can't remember the other one. They're all slightly down, and that's what we're really diving into to figure out why they're actually down in comparison to 2021, because you almost assume more people are back to work, the LST would be up.
Is the AmeriHealth, are they in?
So that is something else we're looking at. The AmeriHealth is not sticking out to us on this list. They could be going through a third party. A lot of the LST list, it's not just SAP. They go through third party payroll companies. So they're listed as somewhere in Texas or something like that.
Got
That is one that I actually asked them to really dive into to figure out where AmeriHealth is on this list. And they haven't gotten back to me yet, or I will follow up this afternoon with them now that
Right.
but that is one that is not a concern, but one that we're actually looking into in depth because it's not sticking out to us on the list. You would think they would be one of the, at least
Right,
the
to jump
top,
out.
yeah, at least the top 10 at this point, but there's nothing in the top 10 that really jumps out as
Rich,
AmeriHealth.
net of the mainline health transfer tax, what is what's the LST number for the year?
The LST number for the,
Just real quick, the transfer tax is not LST.
Oh,
So
I'm
just to
sorry.
make sure you understand.
Oh, okay,
there's a
I'm
difference.
sorry, I saw,
LST is local service tax, which is the dollar everybody
yeah,
pays.
my mistake, they're both in a category of other tax.
correct,
Yeah.
I
yeah.
understand, but LST is a subsection, so what is LST for the year?
So our LST for the year is $538,000 below where we were at in 2021. Of that 538,000, 317,000 of it is the transfer, is the one-time transfer. So we are down approximately 200,000.
Yeah, which is counterintuitive with people presumably going back to the office. Right.
No, this
This is
is,
transfer tax.
this
I'm
transfer
sorry, I
tax.
apologize.
Yeah.
I see.
And if you remember what was happening last
That's right,
year,
right, mainline health
everybody was
was
buying properties at
Got it.
Yeah,
well above asking price, and we get the
Yeah,
percentage
we
of
get
that,
the-
so that would make sense.
understood.
Okay, thank you.
The next line item you'll see is license fines and rents. These are showing an increase of 31,000. We did a really strong cleanup this year. We went through and contacted pretty much almost everybody that hasn't paid, which we haven't done in a couple of years, mostly because of COVID. We didn't want to really beat people up. So we went through, so a lot of that 31,000 is a one-time collection that we're not going to see next year because we can only collect
Cleanup,
delinquents.
right.
You can only beat them up so many times.
Yeah. So we figured it would be a good time to just get
Take
that
them
off.
off the deadbeat list.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. You'll see a very minimal increase in interest of about $2,000. That's just because of where interest rates are at. If anybody was at the last supervisors meeting, we got approval to invest, I think it was 10% of our capital fund and up to 20% of our general fund, which we're gonna cut some checks and invest them in Pliget, which is the Pennsylvania investment.
Investment.
Higher yielding investments.
There you go. Yeah, so they have some better interest rates that we spoke with them about. So we're gonna take that from a normal checking account, put them in a higher
Good.
yield.
And after today, they may even be better, so we'll see.
Yeah.
You'll see an $11,000 increase in state and local government revenues. This is just a one-time grant that we got for, I believe it was for the rain gardens. Again, we won't be seeing that next year. Other financing sources is down $19,000. This is a direct payment from the insurance companies. Unfortunately, we've had more accidents in 2022 that have been reimbursed from the insurance company. Along with the revenue comes the expense. So
Right.
hopefully that won't be up next year.
That has nothing to do with the accident I was in, by the way.
Yeah.
Just want to make sure I'm transparent.
So the last category that you're going to see a large variance in is public safety. It's down $401,000. This is to do with a one-time permit we got for the Ellis Preserve in the tune of $522,000 in 2021. That's obviously a one-time revenue source. Ellis will be coming in either late this year or early next year to pull the last set of their permits. So that's something we're really monitoring for the 2023 budget, whether it's next year or this year. It's
When is that project with the last phase of commercial expected to end?
So I don't know that they have a specific date at this, like target date at this point. Their intent is to do the first 5 buildings, pull the permits for the first 5 buildings this fall. It'll probably take a year and a half for that to get built out and, everybody into those 5 buildings. The remaining, I think there's another 5 plus the hotels, conference room center, and office building. The conference room or the wedding venue and the office building, they have asked to, and I'm going to use the word borrow, the sewer capacity from the township while they're doing their planning module to recover some sewer capacity that hasn't been used. So that probably is 6 months out before they are able to do all of that and pull all of that and move forward. Maybe a little sooner, depending on how everything goes. And then it'll probably be another, I'm guessing next fall, maybe even the following year before they pull in the rest of it, just based on what I'm hearing. Their goal is to get all the pad sites done and ready to go. And it would just be a matter of coming back and building buildings. But it's, you know, part of it's demand, you know, it's still an interesting time. You know, in regards to retail and
commercial.
and restaurants and in-person stuff. So they're moving forward, but I'm guessing that we're probably talking about a year before the final permits are pulled, and then probably another year and a half before the project's completely wrapped up.
Thank you.
And that's Steve Neese's.
No, that's okay.
You
Yeah,
know, I mean,
just for planning purposes, as we think this
yeah,
stuff through.
I suspect that we're going to see the end of income from it probably within the next year,
Thank you.
at least the major income from it.
Hey, Rich, you mentioned insurances, is that not covering everything, like the police car that they approved to be replaced, that was involved in the accident, insurance? didn't-
Yeah, the insurance won't recover the full value. It's kind of like if you're in an accident with your car and you have a 2016 vehicle, it's worth X today. The insurance company gives you what the X is, whatever that value. But one of the challenges we have as a township, it's really hard for us to go out and buy a 2016 replacement. We tend to have to go out and buy a new, partly because of the purchasing, the way we have to do purchasing. You know, we have to do a bid process. Well, it's really hard to do that on a used car because this used car is not the same as that used car to do it. It's not impossible, but we tend to go back and just buy new and move forward. And the only way that's not true is we bought up Municipid from another municipality. But I've been looking at cars from the Municipid side. They're kind of like the ones we sell. And it's typically not what we're looking to put out on the road. We're actually getting rid of the ones that, you know, have 100,000 miles on them and the wheels are kind of wobbly and, you know, I'm being a little sarcastic, but you know, that's the case.
And there's no way to recover from the person that caused the accident? Or we just don't bother?
I don't think, I mean, it's kind of like, you know, I've never been able to recover more than my car value. I don't know how I would recover more, you know, unless there's, I mean, I guess you could take to court and see if there's a negligence issue that, you know, but if it's a true accident, you know, the person that hit the police car didn't intentionally hit the police car. I mean, they did run a stop sign, but it wasn't intentional.
All right.
And by the way, I hope the snarkiness of this meeting has not created cynicism.
Is it starting to sound that way?
Yeah,
I
don't want-
apologize.
I don't want you to think of any bad habits. All right, Rich.
Yeah, so moving on to expenses, you're going to see about 5 major variances. The first is salaries and wages. It's up about 173,000. That is just staff increases, as well as the police contractual increases. The second you're going to see is a large decrease of 207,000 for benefits. This is actually twofold. The first is our MMOs, your minimum municipal obligation for our pensions is down, as well as we received a 2-month credit for our health benefit because the trust didn't have the expenses that they thought they were going to incur for the previous year. The next you're going to see is a increase of 111,000 for contracted services. This is directly related to recycling costs. 108 of the 111,000 is recycling contract increases. You're going to see a increase of 1.2 million in capital expenses. Like I said before, there was a $1.1 million transfer of our one-time revenue sources from the 2021 budget into the capital fund. That shows as an expense in the general fund and a revenue in the capital fund. And the last variance you're going to see is a $405,000 decrease in our debt line item. This has to do with our road program borrowing. This was a one-time debt service payment in the general fund for 2021. The liquid fuels funds freed up in 2022, so that debt service payment went from general fund to the liquid fuels. So that is where we're at in a nutshell for August of 2022.
Awesome. Thank you, sir.
Any
there-
questions or concerns
Yeah,
from your group?
Is there anything that you can see on the immediate horizon that would give you cause for concern through the end of the year?
For the 2022 budget?
Yes.
I don't see anything that's I'm concerned about in 2022. I have much more concern for 2023. And we're, Rich and I are actively looking at that. The gap is still quite significant there, and we're trying to bring that down to something that makes sense. We have a couple ideas, but they're not, it's still a very big number, and we're just trying to figure out what makes sense.
Okay.
On old business? Discussion and action regarding the various options for stormwater financing as presented by the Stormwater Financing Subcommittee.
Yeah, I can
Yes, want
speak.
to lead us into it?
Yes, this was kind of a culmination of data gathering, information, interviewing folks from other municipalities that have headed down this road, their various experiences in terms of what worked, what to look out for. And it's obviously we're trying to weigh alternatives that are not positive, they're negative, but the ones that we can envision going forward that the township residents could understand, appreciate, be willing to fund and participate. So these were kind of what we came up with. As you can see, the alternatives considered: the township administered tax, administered stormwater fee, municipal authority administered fee through the current authority, a new authority, or a hybrid mix of the various options. We went through advantages, disadvantages that we could determine. The big issue with that we felt from an equity perspective, the fee being most palatable as compared to a tax, in that a fee would fall upon all parcel owners as compared to a tax only those that are eligible to be taxed. So then those that are not for profit or for various other reasons are exempt. The fee would not fall upon those organizations.
The tax.
Excuse me, the tax would not fall upon them. Thank you. Thanks, Alex. And that coupled with the fact that we, in order for us to do an analysis to determine the impervious coverage on a parcel by parcel basis, we do not have readily available data in Delaware County as compared to what we found out in Bucks County, where there is readily available data. We kind of hit a wall in terms of, well, are we going to take on the task of determining impervious coverage on a parcel by parcel basis in Newtown Township and OMG? That would take a boatload of money and a boatload of time. And are we effectively eating into the money in order to figure out path? So we came away from that in terms of probably not being a viable option, that we want to spend that time and resources and fall back to one of the more obvious paths. Tax being the one that can be most direct, but then directing quickly implemented, but then, well, but what about the equity issue where the some significant contributors to the issue, if it's a tax only, would not bear their fair share. So that's when we gravitated to the mixed kind of model. where there would be some type of a fee arrangement. Thinking forward, how do you structure a fee where we're not going to end up with litigants that are going to be challenging our methodology around how we determine that fee and what is fair? And well, I've put in a stormwater system on my property and they didn't put a stormwater system on their property. How come we're paying the same fee? That whole kind of issue. And to be fair, we haven't resolved how we could administer a fee in a way that could explicitly anticipate and, to the extent possible, reduce those litigation risks. So we've developed here advantages, disadvantages. The subcommittee didn't really reach, I think, a formal recommendation. I don't think necessarily it would have been within our purview to do that. We kind of felt, well, we want to put this out, we want to put the draft information out, and we wanted to have this group kick this around and come to, is there another path that we didn't think of, or is there a clear direction, one way versus another way? Steve?
Yeah, I think I would just add a couple quick things. We have talked to the solicitor about some of this because there, when you start looking at a fee versus a tax, there are some things that you need to do to be consistent in how you do it. So for example, one of the thoughts was if we treated every property kind of almost like a storm, almost like a sewer kind of situation, was if every homeowner automatically had a 1 EDU or one equivalent dwelling unit value, and then that a business, and we took an average of what we thought that 100 homes were, and saying this impervious coverage was, and then we have businesses and or other organizations that aren't residential homes come back and give us what their impervious coverage is, and then we charge against that. That was one thought. The solicitor felt like we may have to do a little bit more evaluation, going back to what Ed was saying regarding, he felt like there might be houses that had significant amounts of impervious coverage versus some that had very little, and it's hard to say that you're charging the same for both.
Impervious meaning finished. Yeah.
A hard surface that
Yeah,
rain is
yeah.
not penetrating.
So it could be a patio, could be a driveway, could be
Swimming pools.
Yeah.
Yeah,
basketball
swimming
courts.
pools usually don't count because they collect water, but the space around them,
Hard surfaces.
hard surfaces do. So, to do that evaluation, as Ed indicated, would be very timely or very costly and also take a fair amount of time. Not saying it's not the right thing to do. It's just, there would be an investment from the township to do that. Probably would look at a year and a half, maybe 2 years to actually complete that study. And in that process, as Ed mentioned, it could, you got to pay somebody to do that. That's not happening for free. And we would have to look at how to proceed there. The other thing that I would just add is that though the easiest is obviously a tax, you leave out potentially, as Ed mentioned, some of the highest hitters or the biggest, areas that have impervious coverage. And, example of that would be Episcopal Academy or, churches or, things like that, which have, tend to have very large parking lots, tend to have very high areas of coverage of buildings and those kind of things. And obviously it impacts what that is. And the other piece of this, just so you're aware, is that there is a pushback from the public on either of any way of moving forward with this, right? If it's kind of buried in your taxes, nobody says that much about it. But when you look at a fee and or a tax that's specific for the purpose of stormwater, you've all heard the term rain tax and things like that that's been used for this. And so there is a public perception piece that's very important on how we move forward with this. And the last thing that I would say, and let you all kind of have conversation, is that whatever we do, we just have to make sure people are being relatively consistently treated. And the question that Ed brought up, which I think was something that we spent a lot of time talking about, is what do we do about properties that have spent hundreds of thousands of dollars in stormwater on their property compared to a property that has spent nothing? And do we need to give some kind of credit to those folks, whether they're a business or whether they're, a residence who's done that? And those who have put stormwater in will tell you, even on residences, they've spent, $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 putting in stormwater. So that's not that they haven't made. It's not like they've spent $5 putting in a rain barrel, right? Or whatever a rain barrel is, $100, whatever. Some of them have spent significant monies doing that, and they're way ahead of what the majority of the township is, because the majority of the township was built before we did stormwater management at that level.
You make the one point you make is really interesting to me, is that the resident or the taxpayer,
Yeah.
perspective on a rain tax.
Yeah.
The first thing I thought about when I read this, and by the way, you guys did a really nice analysis, pros and cons, goods and bads and everything. But the first thing I looked at was, we as an entity need to get way ahead of this.
Yeah.
Okay? And we need to make sure the town and the townspeople and the business community and everyone else understands why this is needed.
Yep.
Because if we don't do that, it will come off as a rain tax.
Yep.
And the one thing I've learned after doing this stuff for 100 years is that if we don't have everybody understand to a degree, because there are going to be a degree of people who think that any tax is foolish or any payment is foolish. Say, look, if we don't do this, here's what's going to happen. If we don't make that case early and often and consistently through our newsletter and other things that we do and educate the public, I think we're going to make this a lot harder than it should be.
Yep.
It's kind of like this. If we were surrounded by a moat, and one day we said, you know what, we should put a bridge across that moat that the entire community is going to benefit from. People say, it's not a bad idea. We don't have to swim anymore. Yeah? So we put up a bridge. People say, let's pay for that bridge. This is the same kind of a thing. And if we don't create that burning platform, the resistance and pushback will be massive across all corners. People don't get this. They don't understand, well, why is it an issue? It's not that bad. I don't flood around by my house.
Yep.
So it's really it's the ultimate NIMBY project, but the greater good concept is way beyond the scope. If I can comment one thing on what you guys did, I think by calling out the different entity approach is the right way to do this. It's not just a residential thing. It's not just a commercial thing. It's anybody who has any kind of footprint in the township. And we've learned this, I think, from the pilot environment, that there are a lot of, in my words, a lot of entities not paying their fair share towards how this town operates. We can't let that happen in a situation like this. I don't care what their stature is. I don't care what they do. I remember Alexis saying last year you had an issue at Aronimink because they started cutting down trees to change your stormwater issue in your neighborhood. Stuff like that happens all the time, and we're not aware of it. So anybody who has any kind of a footprint in the township needs to contribute to this being done. That's my 2 cents. But again, I really like the work you guys did. It was very thorough.
Do we have a current, I apologize, Alex, do we have a current estimate of the dollars on known projects that Eileen was working on? Where do we stand on that? So we can start to build towards some type of a public communication of what.
Yeah,
what's
right
going
now,
on.
I think we have numbers that take us up through the first 5 or 6 projects. And I believe the numbers are somewhere between 15 and 25 million. I'd have to go back and look exactly. And that's just the first 5 or 6. I think on the list, there were 32, if I remember correctly, projects that were listed on the list. And that list is now about a year old. And I know of at least 2 projects that have been added since then because of things that have come up. And these are projects that we think are township oriented versus township projects that are PennDOT and projects that are, the question that has come, how responsible is the town for a stream bank that runs through somebody's property, right? And, you buy the property, you have a stream bank running through your property. We view it that that's kind of yours to maintain, because if not, if you want to look at a map that has all the stream banks on the township, that number's huge. Now, that said, we're looking, just so you understand, we're looking at it at least two different ways of kind of attacking this stormwater issue. We have known stormwater problems where people have shared with us, because of the amount of rain that we get, because of the way the stormwater is in, we actually get flooding in our homes. We get, their backyards flood, those kind of things. The streets flood, we have that kind of knowledge. Then we have the state mandate of what when we refer to, and you've heard it, there's the MS4 side of this, which is the fact that we have to reduce pollutants going into Darby Creek and into Crum Creek. And so, and we have a plan every 5 years of how much we're supposed to reduce. And I forget the exact amount of reduction this time, but to do that, that plan is somewhere between 1.5 and $2 million for the next 5 years, just to meet the state requirements
That's
of
a per year
stormwater.
charge?
Excuse me?
That's a per year charge?
No, it's the total to do that. But I can tell you, it's in regards to what the long-term impact is on the township.
Yeah, that's
I
not
mean,
gonna
we're
work.
fixing this much of this big of a problem.
It's only gonna get bigger.
So it's one of those things that every 5 years, we're going to be looking at another project. And as the projects go down, we're doing the easy stuff first with the things that give us the most credit. And we're tackling this in, stream bank restoration and things like that. And I will tell you, I've had the conversation, just so you know, the board at the last meeting appointed a new engineer, Stantec, will finish up what they're doing on a couple projects. And then Pannoni has been appointed. I've had a short conversation with Pannoni. I'm letting them get their feet wet, but we're going to sit down and we're going to tackle this again from a little bit different perspective, in that I've been having conversations with engineers, and I've been having conversations with people who understand this stuff way better than I do, regarding when you start doing stream bank restoration, what's the impact from doing things downstream, upstream, and those kind of things. And so we're going to actually reevaluate the plan that we have. The idea was to do it on all township property starting out. And by doing it on all township property starting out, you don't need an easement. I just go in and do it because we own the land. It's very simple. There's no fighting. I can just go do it. The problem that I found out is, and that I'm looking at, is that if we do it that way, we may end up having to go back and redo what we did, because if we don't fix upstream first, what's coming from upstream may damage what we did downstream. And so to me, that just doesn't make sense. I hate spending money twice, for the same thing. So I'm a person who looks for how do we do it once and do it right. And even though there's more pain up front, I'd rather take the pain up front and work our way through it. So we did actually ask Stantec, who was doing the first project, to actually start at the beginning of the stream head versus starting at where we were originally going to start. And then we will go back to DEP and ask for an amendment to our MS4 plan, because it seems to make the most sense to just start at the head of the stream, fix the problems there, and then work our way down. The long term, we get a better benefit. And so that being said, I want us to understand we're dealing with two issues. We're dealing with a town that was built prior to stormwater management being an issue, most of our neighborhoods. And then the second piece we're dealing with is the fact that there's requirements coming down from the state that we have to meet. The
Unfunded.
state, yeah, the unfunded. And the state requirements, I don't see stopping anytime soon. Like I only see that number continuing to grow, the impact, and, you know, like, it's not going away, is my point.
So this is all part of that argument I was talking about, not argument, the
Yeah.
communication that we need to put in place, because people need to understand, you know, why, first of all, why this is an issue. But the bigger thing is, Steve, you make an excellent point. When this community was built, no one thought about this stuff. Hell, no one thought about it 10 years ago for the most part.
Yeah.
You know, and I'll give you a good example. When I moved in across the street, I saw these massive retention basins being built. I'm like, I've never seen those before. Like all the houses I've lived in my entire life, I never saw a retention basin. Someone explained to me why you needed that. I said, well, that's news to me. You know, so I guess it's all part of, you know, people's basic understanding of things.
That's a good segue. Could I just ask a few questions? I know, Alex, you've been waiting to say something for a while. You go. I'm sorry.
You can use that to throw to my head to get an answer.
Yeah, I think, well, first I have to compliment Steve on his waiting a little bit so the engineers can get their feet wet on stormwater. I thought that was a very good comment. But Stephen or Rich, do you have this, is there a way available to figure out who the township has billed over the last X number of years for stormwater, or who the township has required to put in stormwater projects? Because I think I'm still paying, or I paid into a fund for you to inspect my stormwater system for the rest of my life, right?
Well, you paid into a fund to cover 10 years worth of those inspections.
Okay,
So the answer to your question is, do we know the homes that have had to do stormwater management as part of our stormwater ordinance? The answer is yes. I'm getting that obviously our engineer is the one that's been tracking that. And obviously with us changing engineers, I'm getting them to turn all that information over to us.
We also have.
And we also
Yeah,
already have it.
just the way that we put the money into the accounts, we have at least from when I started in 2015, 2016, we have a full list.
But we need to go back a couple years.
Mhm.
And so we do have that and we do track that. So it's not that we don't know what it is, you know, we don't
Right.
know who it is. The question becomes, and John, you'll understand this, is, you know, you did a project at your house and whatever you did, and you had to do X number of dollars, but that only applied to what you did, that was your addition. It didn't apply to what you had done, what was there before. And so the question will come about that we're going to have to decide is, what's the credit look like based on all of those things? And so, and can just imagine, I think we're
All the
up
variables.
over like, is it 300 or 400 homes that have done projects?
Yeah, there's.
You
quite a
know,
bit.
I mean, so now we're looking at, you know, probably individually going back and calculating, and if for each one of those, and then you have projects like Lissitor that has a whole stormwater system that's in it, that's way more complicated than anything that I could explain, because I don't understand any of it. You know, I mean, it's like this house goes to this bed for this part, but goes to that bed for that part. And I mean, it's not there's nothing simple in that community with how it's done. So it is going to be a challenge to figure out and figure out how credits would be given for those kind of things.
yeah, and is it safe to say though that somebody like Lissitor or Ellis Preserve, their stormwater management system is in a position where the work that you're going to do is not going to be fixing their existing stormwater management plan and infrastructure, because that in theory is state of the art.
I would say this, that, you know, if I talk to the people who live, and I'm literally going to say downstream, and who get impact, they would say that it may be state of the art, but it's not adequate. And so, we're going to have to look at that and determine, every stormwater management plan is built to a certain level of requirement. And then if we have a storm that is above that level, so let's say every stormwater management's built to a 100-year flood, 100-year storm. The assumption is that a 100-year storm, I believe, is 7 inches over a period of X number of hours. What happens when you have 2 inches in 1 hour? That system, though it's designed for 7 inches over 24 hours, isn't managing 2 inches in an hour, if that makes sense. And so there is this point of, if we're trying to address stormwater, one, I think people need to understand we will never be able to address it so that when you go down and you come through Newtown or any community, that there's never any flooding, that there's never any, that's just not going to happen. What we can do is mitigate as much of it as we can. And part of the question will be is how many dollars are we willing to spend to mitigate as much as we, what is our goal and where are we headed? Our first goal, though, is if we could bring all of the existing communities up to or equal to what is done in a new community today, then we can start going back and saying, what are the next steps in how to do that?
Thank you.
That makes sense.
Yep, thank you.
I don't know if that answered your question, but
It did, thanks.
So my thoughts on this after reading this spreadsheet, where the hybrid model, and I would never vote for it, because that's the one with the most disadvantages. They didn't list them there, but because it combines both the disadvantages of the fee and the tax. So it's the worst possible choice. Right? You want to pick the one with the supposedly the least disadvantages. The tax, in my view, would be out for the reasons already stated. So we're left with a fee. And if you're left with a fee, the way I would approach it would be not, this impervious coverage stuff is sort of making it way more complicated, I think, than it needs to be. If you just applied a fee based on the amount of land that a person has, and start there, because as we said, when there's a storm, everybody's contributing to the storm runoff, regardless of whether you have impervious coverage or not. I have a lot of land, and when it storms, not when it rains, but when it storms, water gets, Darby Creek cuts right through the middle of my property, and water runs off of my grassy field straight into Darby Creek. So I am contributing, in a sense, to storm water, regardless of my coverage of my property. So we're going to start, I would start with the premise that your square footage or acreage of land is contributing to the stormwater regardless of the impervious coverage. And then I would look to see who, for those 300 homes that you indicated that have put in a stormwater catchment or whatever, you give them a credit. And my view on the credit is, let's take John's example. If he had a project for 1,500 square feet and he then put in stormwater to measure that 1,500 square feet, okay, well then to catch that 1,500 square feet, then that 1,500 square feet gets taken out of the acreage assessment. He's still got a lot of land that's contributing to stormwater runoff that's not accounted for by his catchment system. And then, and that's all information that's readily available right in the records for those 300 homes. And I think if you go down the path of having to measure everybody's impervious zones, it's a Herculean task that you'll never finish. And, Occam's razor, just keep it simple. And my view is that the folks like John who put in these $20,000 systems, when you look at it, how much this fee is going to be, it's not, I understand that any penny is a penny, but I don't think it's going to be such that once we spread it out across the township and then we include those entities that aren't currently paying taxes and they're included in it, that this fee is going to be quite manageable, easier to defend and explain to folks.
To that, I had a conversation with Rich yesterday, Alex, and I think, Rich, the math we did is roughly 25 million divided by 5,000 or 5,500 taxpayers is roughly $5,000.
Yeah.
And that is over the amount of time that the township would need to build them for this. So is it, you said 40 years is the useful life of stormwater?
Yeah, give or take.
But John, you just said over the taxpayer, so Episcopal counts as one taxpayer?
I used rough numbers so that Episcopal doesn't matter. I use rough numbers. So if you add in the non-tax paying entities, the number is it's still roughly $5,000. If you include Episcopal, they pay their 5,000. If you don't, they don't, but it's all rough numbers.
How can Episcopal be paying $5,000 if I'm paying $5,000? That makes no sense. In the way I was describing, if you go by acreage and how much they're contributing to the storm problem. then-
I'm sorry, Alex, I was just trying to size it for everyone on the committee, what the numbers are when broken down into individual parcels. That could go down to 3,000, it could go up to 6,000. I'm just saying round numbers.
So
to
you're
get-
you're not trying to state policy, you're just saying, hey, this is what it roughly looks like. for
Yeah,
everybody.
roughly.
Right.
Tina, I'm interested in any input from your side of the house without obviously contributing what the opinion is of the supervisors.
Well, the supervisors, that's why I think we've kind of tasked you all to look at this project. We're looking at ways to be creative, to pay for these improvements, because we've got communities that are truly, when it rains, they're underwater, and it is gotten worse. And it's just not the development in Newtown Township, it's the development,
Upstream.
to use Jim's analogy, we're not a moat. We are part of a whole community. And so we're impacted by anything that happens in and around us. So the point of this is to try to, because we've spent a lot of township time on this and our engineers to keep this moving forward. And we've met with our state representatives as well, because we've got some areas in the township that are impacted and they need help right now. And we've had on-site meetings with both the state rep and the state senator's office. So this is a major issue for us as a board, at least specifically, because in development, this is what I do as well. So I understand the impact of it, and that we do need to do something. And to all of your point, it's got to be everyone. It has to be the non-tax paying entities, because they contribute to it. And I know that some of them are nonprofits that struggle financially sometimes, but if it's spread across the board, it's de minimis. To John's point about the 5,000, that's just a number, and I understand that 5,000 would be, across, would be for bigger units. To Alex's point, the larger properties, and so it's just, I think it's time everyone kind of steps up to this. So that's my opinion as a board. I don't know how my other supervisors feel about, charging the nonprofits, the not-for-profits, but that's my opinion, because they do contribute. So.
Well, I think to your last point, and this is on the finance committee perspective, a nonprofit is just a way you report your financials. Okay? There are plenty of nonprofits in this township that are significant entities. And to hide behind a nonprofit status, I think, is a bit of a Weasley move. So there are different ways you can handle different things. I think one thing, listen to everything everybody said, there's got to be some degree of best practice out there. What other townships have done, either the selection of who's included or how it's structured. And I just think that there are ways that other folks have done this already we can learn from. Because I think our analysis is dead on. It's the right look at the pros and cons and what works where and what can work somewhere else. But once we start looking at what others have done, I think we'll benefit a lot from it. And the nice thing about it, there's so much knowledge out in the world right now, you don't need to go find a consultant to help you figure out how to go do that. Second thing, after hearing everybody, what they're saying, does it make sense to us to form a small working group of non-residential participants? Is that a good word to refer to everybody? You participate in stormwater to get their perspective on things. And I'm not just talking about the big developers, but to say, hey, this is a problem we have to fix. Do you have any recommendations on how we fix it?
And I just want to clarify what you said. Did you say non-residential
Correct.
participants? Okay,
Non-residential participants in stormwater issues.
okay.
So
Yeah.
you don't care about me. I'm an easy guy to resolve. But what's with the big developers, the big nonprofits, all those folks?
So what I'm hearing, Jim, is, do we have enough of information at this point that this finance committee can make a recommendation? Or do you think we still need to try and gather more data in terms of what's in the general public? I know we've done some researches. I know Rich has done has participated in some conferences on this topic. And we really didn't come back with the crown jewel that we had hoped
Got it.
going
So
in.
I'm sorry, I didn't realize you'd done that.
Yeah,
level.
Yeah,
so
we've
we've,
talked to,
Yeah, probably 3 different townships.
Okay.
Middletown Township, they're kind of in the infancy stages like we are. We spoke with Warminster in Bucks County, who actually is implementing a fee. They're doing it based on percentage of impermeable versus permeable. So, and then the third one we reached out to is Erie Township in Hershey, but they're kind of a whole different animal because
Because of the park.
because of Hershey Park.
Oh, duh. Yeah, that's a big
Yeah.
old.
Yeah, they,
surface.
there's- Yeah. So we have reached out to Radnor as well. I believe that they currently have stormwater.
So,
fee.
my point is. because if you-
I just would say we have, and the problem that we found is that nobody,
There's no answer.
what you're getting is what we found is some of the ways to do it. And then some additional that we kind of, when we started looking at this, we said, the idea of whether or not, and this would be a board decision, whether or not we task the current municipal authority with doing it versus having a new municipal authority do it. That's a decision that's more internal
Yeah.
than what it would be. But you really do have 3 basic.
Yeah, no, so let me retract it. So you guys have obviously done that level of work and the level of diligence you've done is far beyond what I, so is our action to make a recommendation based on what you have there?
At this point, if the committee feels that they've got enough of information to take a vote on it, yes. But I think part and parcel with what we've gotten is we've got to figure out a communication vehicle to get this out, to get out the data that should be presented to the public, so that we can be in front of the reaction instead of playing catch up. But yet, do the supervisors, would they be comfortable where we actually put out data on this? Or would they feel, well, they really haven't taken a formal decision one way or the other? So I'm struggling with the need for communication, yet are we kind of jumping the authority? And so I think this finance committee can make a recommendation, but I personally feel the next step is communication. We need to get something out to the public now in the fourth quarter of the magnitude of this issue.
I'm 100% behind that. In fact, if you guys disagree with me, please stop me. But one of the recommendations we need to make to the supervisors is to create a working group to communicate this out. And I'm not saying it's the purview of the newsletter team. That's not what I'm looking to do. This is a bigger beast than that.
Yeah.
And we need to figure some, for example, what you guys have done a great job with these rain gardens and what you've done around here. It's almost like a physical billboard for what you're trying to communicate. Stuff like that is the kind of stuff you need to do around this issue. I don't know what the answer is, but I'm saying you have the Let's figure out the best ways to get this message out.
Of course, MS4 has deadlines every 5 years. Are there state mandated deadlines on this, the bigger issue? Or are we setting our own timeline?
In regards to, like, is there a mandate that we get the correction done that's impacting Florida Park, the Heights, the avenues, over where you used to live, over in Tyson and that area? Is there a requirement from the state? No. There is a demand from the residents. And I would tell you, I don't want to speak for the board, but my guess is the board is saying that demand is almost greater than the fact that DEP wants us to go fix some riparian buffer. I mean, when we look at what when you have some folks, and the good news, bad news is we've had a relatively light rain summer, and so, most people have been pretty quiet and said, well, we're not dealing with all the issues we dealt with before. But, we know that this issue is not going away. And if we start acting on it now, if, let's say we could get the funding and be ready to go January, there's still neighborhoods that wouldn't be taken care of in the next 5 years, just because it takes that amount of time to build it, to do it. We did a $33 million SOAR project, and we started that before the COVID, and it's still trying to get complete. Now, I think there's some issues there, but it's not taking those out. You still have, it doesn't happen overnight. And so this is a process. And so we have put money, we took the ARPA funds, the board approved the ARPA funds, and the first 2 projects on our list are being tackled by using ARPA funds. And we felt like that was the best way to use those dollars. And to be honest with you, I'm actually going to be working on a grant, hopefully, to get done in the next couple of weeks, that would be looking at tackling potentially one of our MS4 projects, and at the same time, take care of Greer Park, that build out. So I say that to say this, that no, there's not a demand from the state that we fix the problems that are within the different areas. There is a demand within our community that we fix those. And I think that's greater.
Well, then that goes to what you've been saying. About, communicating to the residents.
If I could go back to my point, which is to communicate to the residents this difference between rain and storm. I mean, it's unfortunate that the storm catchment system that John put in has the word storm associated. It really is for regular rain. When storms happen, all bets are off. And I'm telling you, on my property, I'll send you videos of it. I mean, there's sheets of water rolling down hills, and the ponds overflow, Darby Creek overflows. I mean, it's a mess. And this focus on pervious and impervious is absolutely the wrong thing, in my view, when you're dealing with the storm, because the impervious and pervious stuff is dealt with by the rain, and that's why we put in his thing. But as a township, regardless of how much coverage you have on your property, I have a tiny percentage of coverage on my property. So when it rains, I'm not contributing anything. When it storms, I am a big contributor to runoff, even though I have a tiny bit of impervious relative to the size of the property.
It's almost like your rain gutters. When it rains, the gutters
It
work.
works.
When it storms, the gutters don't
They
matter.
overflow. Right?
Yeah, they just blow right past it, and there's the issue. And that's where you used the word rain tax before. That's the least of our worries. I lived here in 1999 when that hurricane blew through. That was not a rainstorm. That was 17 inches of freaking storm water, right? So people don't, unfortunately, people don't pay attention to these things until they matter. Or if you live in certain neighborhoods or have, a floodplain effectively running through your backyard.
That's how we can communicate to the township. Yes, Lister has a stormwater management system that's fantastic. Unfortunately, it's mislabeled, I think, as a rainwater management system.
Yeah.
That's, that's high tech and super great. But again, when we have these you know, when we have a 1 in 100-year rainstorm occurring every year, everybody's contributing. I don't care what your impervious is. I don't care what your stormwater management thing is. It's all going somewhere. And if we can get this communicated to the township that we all have a responsibility to the extent we own land here to help alleviate this, and it's to the benefit of the community.
So, oh, I'm sorry, Sherry, go ahead.
Sorry.
I just have a question, and maybe it's, you said it before and I didn't hear it, but the pros and cons, has anybody weighted them? Because if there's one thing on the pros and cons that is super important, that may supersede all the discussion. I don't know.
My sense of the discussion is it's the equity fairness issue.
Yeah,
It's the
I
one
think,
that jumps out.
yeah, I don't think we went through and said this weighs
Yeah, we
more
didn't
than
weight
that.
them.
I
No, we
think
didn't
that-
weight them, Sherry. We didn't want to try, we wanted to try and get as much of it out and just let the committee here kind of flesh out what's the most significant.
So my read on this, because we need to come to an action. okay?
Yeah.
What you folks did was great, right? You provided all the data, all the research, the pros and cons of what we had to do. The challenge we have in front of us is what action do we take? And I only say that because it's almost as though we have too many options from which to choose. Right? Do we need to take a little time and say, okay, these are our 3 actions to take, 2 actions, whatever they're going to be, and then because we need to vote on. Right? The problem is we need to winnow this down to the recommendation from the subcommittee is to do A. You say, because do we have that recommendation?
The subcommittee did not want to make a formal recommendation of the options.
And I
They wanted
got my
to-
point. Yeah, I understand the point. So we need to figure out how we're going to get to that decision. Right? Because we have all the data. Excuse me. That's what happens when you're Italian. We need to winnow it down to a decision we can make. Now, I'll ask you this because you and Lisa's not here. What is the best next step for us to take? Because we can't, I don't think there's anything for us to vote on unless someone makes a recommendation and we make a motion towards that recommendation. You understand what I mean? So getting to that decision, do you believe there's a path we can take to do that? Or do you think we need to discuss it more in the next meeting and say, okay, here are our 4 paths, pros and cons, and then make that call?
I don't see our subcommittee reaching a consensus one way or the other.
Got
I
it.
don't see that.
Okay.
We all have our personal bias,
Mhm.
but I think it was more important that this whole group jump into the fray as well. So I don't see, Alex has some strong
Yep.
thoughts.
Yep.
I personally like the hybrid model because we can move quickly on the issue of tax, but with the stated intention, there's going to be a fee that will spread across. And then is it going to be 60-40? Is it going to be 70-30?
Yeah, I get your point, and that's the crux of the issue we have in front of us.
Yeah.
Right? We need to say, this is our recommendation based on all the information we have. I don't think we can do that here today. Okay. If I can make a recommendation to hijack the next agenda, we have to be careful about sunshine laws. Okay, we can't meet independently,
Right,
discuss it or anything else.
right.
But does it make sense? And I want your opinion on this, that we go ahead and do we ask the committee to come back and say, here are 3 approaches. Here are the 3 best approaches we have. Or do we come back and we each have our opinion among the 5 of us and say, you like A, you like B, I like C, you like D. We discuss A, B, C, and D, come to a decision and go from there. I like that approach more because you guys have done your homework.
Tina,
We
if I-
need to take what you provided to us.
can I put you on the spot a moment?
Okay.
And I'm apologizing up front.
I came late too.
Yeah, that's what.
Where the hell's Lebanon?
Well,
So-
that'd be a lesson.
So, from, as a board member, and what we would give back to you from the finance committee, let me just ask this. One is, if this was given to you as a board member saying, here's the approaches that have been come up with, would you want the finance committee telling you the next step, like, we really think this is the best one versus that one? Or are you hoping, now that you know what basically the 5 choices are, because I think that there's some things that this committee really can't understand from, and I don't mean that negatively for this
no,
committee, in regards
Right,
to.
He's not
in-
disrespecting you.
Yeah, I mean, that sounded terrible, but I don't mean it that way. I mean, the board knows some things about what's going on that this committee doesn't, and it may be that, like, for example, to have a discussion of whether or not a municipal authority is handling this or whether the township's handling this may not be a finance committee decision. It's probably going to be a board decision.
Correct.
And so I guess the real question would be, and so that's the reason why I'm asking this, is it, and whether we create a new one or continue with the one that we have, again, I think it's going to be a board decision, not a finance committee decision. So if we get down to really the facts, we're talking about 2 things. It's either going to be a tax or 3 things. It's either going to be a tax, it's going to be a fee based off something, or it's going to be some kind of a, excuse me, a hybrid approach. Is that enough for do you want a recommendation on that? You know, because we might be able to narrow this down for what the finance committee is going to recommend to you. That's what I'm asking.
Tough question, because
I know.
when you hear tax, if the public sees on a, on a supervisor's agenda that they're considering a tax. And I don't know if it would be appropriate or not, Stephen, you'd have to tell me, to have maybe someone from either the finance committee or even the subcommittee to come in and make a presentation and say, we'd like direction, maybe. Would that be appropriate?
I think that's totally, and that's why I'm kind of saying it may be that there's enough here to at least put it before you.
Say, this is
to
what we're
give some
working on.
feedback.
We would just like some direction.
If that helps,
Sure.
you know, so that you guys aren't trying to
Yes,
make a
that's okay.
decision.
What's our
Yeah,
outcome
yeah,
here?
we can't read the minds, yes.
So is the best approach for us to take that? Thanks for that input. For us to come, us, subcommittee or a member of this committee, to come in and say, all right, supervisors, we've done this work. Winnow this down to a degree, because again, we can't make it this big. We got to make it
Right.
something that's more digestible, especially in that kind of.
The details are there, but
Correct. Hey, guys, there's 4 different ways you could do this. Here are A, B, C, and D for your consideration. You tell us what else you want us to do, if you want us to get more information, or if you just want us to go ahead and leave this for you, for your digestion. I think that's a good approach to take.
And that's what I was trying to get at.
Yeah, and I also think, if you whittle it down, maybe if you can give us more information of how many homes already have some kind of,
some data points.
information, that already are in, some kind of stormwater management, even though, to Alex's point, which is a good point, it's managing the rain, not the storms. But I think that it helps to give us information, and it doesn't have, people who are already in this program like John to say, I've already done some work and no one else is, my neighbors haven't, so why am I paying the same amount? We have to put all of that in, that that you've all thought about that. And also, I think what has to happen is everyone has to, as the community has to understand that even though the developers, because everyone's going to point to the developers and say, well, why are we paying and the developers have done this to us? We need to have, I think maybe it wouldn't hurt to give some information to Pannoni and Stantec for them to be prepared to be in, again, to all of your points, to be ahead of it, that we can explain where we are and to show the surveys again that we had done, that, the areas that are most affected. I think that helps, because say, look, it's not just because they've built my favorite development, Ellis Preserve, but I love them. So that the community understands, and that there are parts of the township that are underserved by stormwater management because they were built prior to. So I think that there's some, Stephen knows.
I think if it's fair, I think that I'm hesitant to keep dragging this out, but here's a recommendation that I would make. I think you could task the subcommittee to go back and put a presentation together that would go before the board, that you all would review prior to it going before the board. So we'd have one swing around, if that makes sense. We'll work with the engineer. Rich and I will do some more homework on our end. We'll come together as you bring the subcommittee back together, put together a presentation that would be able to be presented before the board. You can decide who actually does the presentation, but we'll go ahead and get it built. Let you review it one more time, and then we'll get that and we'll get it on the agenda for, late October, early November for the board. We're not going to solve this problem in 2022 for 2023. I've already determined that. It's where we kind of are. But I think, going back, we're having a conversation about some other ordinances and some things. Public community, and Ed brought this up, we really are at a spot where we have to start doing communication, what that looks like.
Yep.
Even if we don't know the exact
Yeah.
answers of where we're headed, it may be as we start doing the communications, the public will drive for us what we end up doing. They may say, I would rather this than that, and the board would hear it and help make the
Even have a
decision.
town hall at some point.
To a degree, yeah, I agree.
So,
Can
anyway,
I ask
if
one
we-
more
if
data
we're comfortable
question?
with that, we could do that.
One more data question, Rich. Do you have in your tax records or in your records from the county, do you know the size of every parcel in the township?
Yes.
Because we should think about that as a spreadsheet as a basis that goes from largest to smallest, or just by tax parcel number, the size of every parcel added up. And then anything that's not parcel, Stephen, I assume is roadway.
Not 100%, but pretty close. You got
Yeah.
some issues that happen in HOAs
Right.
that we have to figure out because, I'm speaking as a resident of an HOA. My footprint of my house and my property that I own as a individual is about 2,200 square feet or 2,500 square foot. And my whole house is 2,000 square foot on the bottom floor. So it tells you how much
Yeah.
actual property I own. But the
Yeah.
HOA has property, but they're not taxed. And
Right.
It's not a parcel. So we're going to have to figure that out. And I don't know that will be on the county level, but we'll work through that.
Right. I think but that to Alex's point, that's going to be very important to know if somebody owns 100 acres versus somebody that owns an acre and a half.
Correct.
That because we're getting the same rainfall in the same storm.
Yep.
How many acres are in this township?
Excuse me,
How many acres are there in the township?
as a township property itself
No,
or
no,
as
just-
the whole township?
The whole township.
We're 10 square miles, 10.2 square miles. I'll have to do the calculation to get you the acres. I don't know right off the top of my head. It's
43,560, but then you have to get that's per acre, and you have to figure out how many 10 and whatever square miles is how many acres.
yeah.
I'll do it at home.
We'll do the calculation and have
I
it
gotta
for
watch a
you.
YouTube video. What I was hoping to do quickly was John did that interesting calculation of $5,000 per parcel. I was trying to get down to what would be how many dollars per acre. Just as a
Yeah.
rough estimate might be useful too.
Yeah, that's a great calculation, Alex.
Okay, is there any other questions? I think we have a path that this committee has decided upon, that there'll be a regroup by the subcommittee with township, with the goal being a presentation that will first come back to the finance committee and then to the board of supervisors, where we will narrow down the issue of the data, the key data points, and the limited number of options. Secondly, we need to think about the public communication and who's going to get behind that? Who or whom are going to get behind that and take on that challenge?
I think that's maybe a question with the presentation as well, or maybe a conversation that we all can have.
Yep.
And we can figure that out. But it is crucial that we do that. And I think maybe it's part of a lot of our meetings, and maybe there's also, maybe they also present to municipal authority. I don't know, Stephen, I don't know how you feel about that.
I think until
We
you
until we
kind of determine where
decide.
you think this would go,
Okay,
I think, I don't know what authority the municipal
Yep,
authority would
yeah,
have.
I
until you did that.
understood. But that's maybe part of the conversation. But it is important to get this out and to be in front of it. And I do appreciate you all thinking of that, because it does make a difference. This is going to be a big sell. Maybe there are community meetings, that's the one disadvantage that we have, that we're a second-class township. There's a lot that is good, and the one thing is that we don't have wards, so you don't have a commissioner. So as a board member, we represent everyone. Well, as a commissioner, you would too, but there's easier pathways of communication when you have commissioners. But maybe we break it out into neighborhoods somehow and have those kinds of meetings. And to Ed's point, maybe we have a town, a tall meeting. But I think what has to happen is this has to just be, it's got to be in the forefront all the time. This has got to be the major conversation, I think, right now.
Steve, on the sunshine, so if the subcommittee's putting together a presentation and shares it in advance to us on the committee so we can make comments on it, is that like, okay? Like if I'm editing, like he's gonna first come up with a draft, I guess, of his presentation on his subcommittee that I'm not on.
Yeah.
But can I have input then before the next meeting, or? how
So
does
here's
it-
what you could do, and here's how I would recommend it. Steve, you're this committee's representative. Just want to make sure I'm on the right page. So I don't want to commit you to something that's not you. So what we could do is the subcommittee puts together the presentation, gets it done. We could submit it to the committee for review ahead of time. That's not a problem. Comments could come back, and I would suggest they go to Steve, all comments. And so it's not becoming a discussion factor between you as board members or committee members. If they can come back to Steve, then the subcommittee could take and kind of review those as a whole and say, here's some comments that were made, and then decide how to move forward, whether there's an actual change, or say, here's the comments, here's the changes that could be put in place based on that.
Okay, thank you.
It's that way we are not trying to reevaluate the presentation during the whole meeting next time.
Right, I don't think we should spend the next meeting like picking, like, oh, you missed a period here and a comma there, a lot of that could be addressed ahead of time.
That kind of stuff, I'm not worried. That's not material. Whether it's a comma here or a period there, it would be more of an issue if the committee said, if the committee's saying, this is how we're going to present this, and somebody says, no, you got to take all that out. That would have to be discussed on the floor. But if somebody has just a comma or, minor changes like that, or don't use that word, this word would be better, that kind of stuff is not a big deal. But if you're kind of changing the approach, then that's a bigger issue. If that makes sense. But if everything goes back to Steve, we can have one place to pull it together. It doesn't have to be a discussion factor. We can then may take action.
Understood, thank you.
Okay, in terms of, back to our agenda, right, items for the next agenda, I think this will remain as the key item on the next agenda. Any comment from the public? No public comment noted. We will adjourn.